welcome back to What the Hype. And we have an extra special welcome for you this week to another year at Basgiath War College, where I am absolutely sure we are in for a chaste, very innocent school year for Violet Sorengale, and absolutely no funny business by the powers that be in the Kingdom of Navarre. I'm Laura, and I'll be your host this week. And I'm also joined by Pam and Andrew, fellow Empyrean series devotees. How's it going, you two?
Hello. Wow, what an opening.
Good.
I'm impressed by all that, especially because I don't see it in the doc. Where did that come from?
My notes app.
Oh, sweet. Look at Laura, 2 sets of notes.
But if you thought that was off the cuff, I'll take that as a compliment.
I'm just going to pretend it was, even though I know it wasn't.
Me too.
Okay, cool. We'll keep the illusion alive. If you are not up to speed on the Empyrean series, I highly recommend checking out our primer episode about Book 1, Fourth Wing, which we'll be sure to link in this week's show notes. This is also your official spoiler warning because everyone here is up to speed through the second book, Iron Flame, which is where we'll spend most of our time today. But before we dive in, please make sure that you're following us in your podcasting app of choice, as well as on YouTube, where we release video episodes of the pod on Fridays. You can find links to those and all of our social channels by heading over to whatthehypepodcast.com. We are a new show, so subscribing to our various feeds and channels really, really helps us out. So with all of that said, let's dive in. We left off in our pilot episode of covering the Empyrean series by covering just the first 150 pages or so of Fourth Wing, because not everyone was up to speed at that point. We all are now, and by we all are, I mostly mean me. Pam and Andrew had already read Fourth Wing and Iron Flame at that point. But I thought since we didn't get to touch on some of the larger plot points and arcs in Fourth Wing, that we could kind of wrap those up here and then really dive into the plot of Iron Flame.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Cool. I feel like the big reveal for Fourth Wing comes at the very freaking end, like on the last page. And it's that Violet's brother, Brennan, is alive. She's thought that he was dead this entire time and for the prior 6 years. So what has Brennan been up to all that time? Turns out that he's turncoat. He's pulled a turncoat and he's joined the resistance because we learn some really unsettling realities and truths about the Kingdom of Navarre, particularly at the end of Iron Flame.
Yeah. Did you two see that twist coming in terms of him being alive? Because I did not see it coming, so it was a great ending. But when I started rereading Fourth Wing in preparation for our last Fourth Wing episode of What the Hype, I was like, oh, I guess I should have expected it, because he does get brought up a lot during the course of Fourth Wing. So it was kind of all set up for like a grand reveal.
I also didn't expect it, but I just assumed that it was like normal hero's journey. I've lost my father and I've lost my family. My mom hates me. That's why I'm here. You know?
Right. I'm practically
tragedy.
an orphan. Yeah.
Exactly. Like, and so I think that that's probably why I wasn't reading too much into it. But yeah, like I thought this was such a great twist and such a good way to end, you know, a first installment of a series, because it definitely piqued my interest for wanting to pick up the second book.
Yeah. I literally dove immediately into Iron Flame because I already had it. And as soon as I finished Fourth Wing, I was like, wait, what? Like, honestly, I felt like that is probably one of the best reveals that's happened in the series so far. What do you guys think of that?
Yeah, some of it is like, it feels a little bit predictable, you know, in a nice way. You know, there's no shame in like connecting dots or anything like that. But yeah, this is one of the bigger twists for sure. And that's something that I do enjoy about the way that Rebecca Yarros is writing this, is like, even if you can figure some things out with the breadcrumbs she's leaving, there are still some other things that kind of like come out of left fields. And sometimes like if like with what Andrew was saying is like if you go back and like read a little bit from like how she's been setting it up, you're like, okay, I kind of see like maybe how I should have seen this coming. But it is so cool when it takes you by surprise, because that's like the best part of reading.
Yeah, and it is very satisfying because, as we were just saying a couple minutes ago, Violet doesn't have her parents really, and he also actually has been helping her through the Book of Brennan.
Right.
So that was cool too. That really added to, oh my gosh, he's actually back. I don't have to rely on this book with all of his notes anymore.
Yeah. And like it makes sense that he had been like asking about how she was faring. Probably didn't realize that she was going to get, I think he even says like, I was going to see you in scribe colors, but you look good in black, which was like, really sweet. But yeah, like, it was clear that he wrote that book for Mira, the other sister. And so then to know, like, for him to find out later that he was also helping Violet probably meant a lot.
Right. Mira passed it down to her.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'll just throw out one quick prediction. I just want to get it on the record. I think Brennan is going to end up being gay. That's a reveal coming in the next couple of books. And the reason I say that is not me trying to throw gayness onto other people just for fun. But there is a moment, I think in Iron Flame, I tried to find the quote, but I was having trouble finding it. There's a moment where somebody, it may be Violet, asks Brennan, are you seeing anybody? Are you seeing a girl? Are you seeing anybody? And he says, no, I'm not seeing anyone. Something to that effect. I'm very much paraphrasing right now. It stood out to me.
It is Violet.
And it is? Okay.
Yeah, it's right at the beginning. And because she's like upset that,
That's
he's
right.
trying to act like it's normal. And she's like, I don't know anything about you. And she's like, do you have kids? Are you married? And he's like, no partners, no children.
Yeah, it was very like, he didn't be like, no, I don't have a wife. I don't have a girlfriend. I'm not seeing anyone, which tells me something's being set up for the future.
I agree with you, not because of that, but also because they've been setting up this whole like the circumstances surrounding his death with like his bestie, who apparently died. Like that seems very like one sacrificed the other.
That's what I was thinking about, because he seems to know a lot about Taryn's old rider.
Yeah, Naylan, is that how you pronounce it? Yeah.
I'll be so honest with you. I struggle with the names in this book. I'm probably going to say them all wrong. But yeah, I picked up on something similar there. I feel like there's more of a story there about the relationship between the two of them.
Yeah.
But
and I thought that that's what you were going to bring up, Andrew. I didn't think you were going to be like, because Violet, and he told Violet he didn't have any partners.
Oh, no. I guess I should have connected the dots there, too. But that other line really stood out to me first.
And they were roommates. That's like the vibe.
I may have been half asleep reading that section. I don't know.
That was such a great Vine deep cut. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
But I think the reason that it was so easy to miss the breadcrumbs of the Brennan reveal was because there was a lot going on that was distracting for Violet. There was the love triangle, I guess we could call it, between her, Xaden, and Dane, but it's not really, because she establishes pretty early in Fourth Wing that she's not interested in Dane like that. So Dane goes full fuckboy when he realizes he can't have her, and he betrays her. So there's that. He's awful to her throughout pretty much the rest of the year. There's her trying to get her signet, which we know to be lightning. And that is kind of amusing, especially in some of the earlier sex scenes where Violet's having trouble controlling her power, and her O's come with strikes of lightning, which I found myself giggling at as I was reading. Then there's also just the whole relationship between her and Xaden, and the fact that they are both paired to bonded dragons, Taryn and Sigale. And because they're all bonded to each other, they can all hear each other's thoughts. And when the dragons get horny, then the people get horny, and it gets really uncomfortable, especially in the beginning when Violet, well, not so much Violet, when Xaden in the beginning is really trying to keep that wall up. But obviously, he is not successful in that. So I think there was just enough going on in the story and with what Violet was experiencing, also just with all of her struggles being at Basgiath and the number of students who had it out for her because she's General Sorengale's daughter. There were just enough distractions, I think, that made it really easy to miss the hints.
Yeah, you really do get like a bit of everything in this series, like in true, I guess, romantasy fashion. Because there really is like, there's enough action there if you want action. There's enough like sex scenes if you want that. And it definitely like the spice level turns up a bit more, I would say, in Iron Flame. But yeah. There's definitely something for everyone.
And like I think we were talking about in our last Fourth Wing episode, as Laura, you're running through this list, I'm being reminded this book throughout is twisty-turny. I mean, practically every chapter ends on some sort of cliffhanger, and you learn so much. I love the dynamics between the dragons and their riders, and the bond between Violet and Xaden. I thought it was interesting to follow that love triangle between Xaden, Dane, and Violet. Pretty early on in Fourth Wing, it becomes clear that Xaden and Violet are going to have the hots for each other because they just hated each other a little too much, and Violet was a little too attracted to him from the get-go. So you knew where that was going.
Yeah, definitely enemies to lovers for sure. But
yeah,
I don't know. It almost, yeah, I mean, I guess the line between love and hate, they say, is murky at best. But I don't know. We'll talk a little bit more in a moment about how Xaden and Violet's relationship shows up in this book, because I think it does shift a bit. So I'm interested to hear y'all's thoughts on this. So diving into Iron Flame, as y'all mentioned a couple of minutes ago, this book really picks up where Fourth Wing left off, with Violet and team surviving war games. And we pretty quickly come to realize that Dane's dad was the one who knowingly set Violet and team up for a death mission, for a suicide mission, because they encounter Venin and Wyvern, which are two species of things Violet had previously believed were folklore. They weren't real. They weren't creatures that ever actually existed. Well, surprise, at the end of Fourth Wing, she learns that they do. And this opens up a whole new perspective on the Tirish Rebellion and why the Marked One's parents were rising up, because Navarre is really trying to keep itself closed off, and it wants to hoard all of that protective magic for itself and not help anyone outside of its walls. So this radicalizes Violet pretty quickly. At the same time, she has to go back to Basgiath and pretend she knows nothing. And the entire time that she's there, she's trying to covertly research and learn more about why their history was so radically altered. Again, you reach a certain point in Navarian history and you kind of start to draw a blank because the history was changed in order to suit the narrative that the kingdom wanted to portray about the relationships between the different kingdoms and the threats that were out there. So that really is how we're set up for this book, with Violet, having that internal struggle of how much of this did my mom know? How much of this was she involved in? And I also can't tell my sister or my best friend what's happening because I don't want to put them in danger. But I also know that I kind of have to keep this closely guarded because I'm still trying to figure a lot of it out. And I think the premise is so interesting for this book. I was definitely really, really excited getting into it, the way that it set up the the political intrigue of everything that's going on here.
You were talking about the politics. I think something that's interesting is the suppression of the truth. And we see this in other books like Harry Potter, of course, as well. The government wants to keep the venom under wraps to give this perception that they have everything in order. So fighting that dynamic is really interesting. And you also mentioned Violet having to do some research to learn about the venom. I think something that's really interesting, and going back into the history of her kingdom, something that's really interesting is that this is one of Violet's strengths. She was supposed to be a scribe, right?
Right.
Instead, she gets thrown into dragon riding. She still gets to play to her strengths, one of her passions, reading, writing, research, while still training to become an excellent dragon rider. So I love that even though the rug was kind of pulled out from her in terms of her career trajectory and what her dad wanted her to do, she still gets to play to her strengths in this overall story.
Yeah. And we see that in Fourth Wing a lot too, where she kind of surprises people with what she's able to get away with in terms of winning, matches when they have them, figuring out creative ways to survive the various obstacles that are put in her way. And it's because the other kids, I mean, they're like 2021, but like the other kids in this program, they have had a much more linear path to becoming or being conscripted as dragon riders. So they've never had to think outside the box in terms of how to survive. And that's something that really does set Violet apart in this series from everyone else at Basgiath. We also see a lot of tension over the course of this story between Violet and Xaden. And I'm curious to hear y'all's thoughts on this. First of all, Violet is pissed at Xaden because he knew that Brennan was alive, and he also knew the entire truth of what was going on in Navarre and the reason why the marked ones weren't allowed to gather in groups of 3 or more. He's been like covertly working the resistance angle, and even though he and Violet are intrinsically linked through the bond of their dragons, he didn't let her in on any of this. And particularly the fact that he knew Brennan was alive sets her off. But then the dynamic shifts and it becomes this push and pull around Xaden deciding that he does want to be with her, but he won't have sex with her unless she says, "I love you" to him. And there is quite a bit of tugging that happens over that particular scenario. So I just kind of wanted to see, how did y'all feel about the portrayal of Violet and Xaden in this book versus in Fourth Wing?
I think she has a right to be angry, and so I understand why she is. But at the same time, when you have like the building blocks of everything that have come before, you also understand why he couldn't tell her everything. She's still like, even in Iron Flame, she's still kind of like working to harness her signet, harness her powers, block off even like Taryn and Sigale's connection. And, with Xaden knowing that she had this deep friendship with Dane beforehand and knowing like what his signet is and stuff like that. It's like there's so much opportunity there for her to inadvertently give away information. And so I think that like I understand why she doesn't want to like see it that way, but it also makes sense. And I don't know. I think that the whole like him like not wanting to have sex with her until she says that she loves him, like I think that aspect is really interesting. But I think that like, given the nature of like their connection, which like they did not choose, right? It kind of makes sense from like a human standpoint, maybe. And it adds like a different layer to like his character too, because it kind of shows more like he's looking for some kind of like human connection beyond like just lust. And
He's
so
not
to
like any
separate,
other man.
Well, yeah, because he has to be like a book boyfriend, right? Like a hot book boyfriend.
Right.
But I think it would be like easy for somebody to just be like, well, like our dragons are always like horny for each other, so we could just like fuck all the time. And he's not about that. He's like, no, I only want this if like you like really want this. Like aside from like the fact that like the universe has pushed us together, like we don't actually need to be together for this to like work.
But that's something about romantasy, right? It's about creating this tension, like, oh, they can't have each other. And then it just all becomes all the more satisfying. Just like in real life, when you do finally get to experience each other.
Right. Like Laura was saying, the push and pull.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did that work for y'all? Like, did the build up with that push and pull? Because it feels like they spent a really significant amount of time in this book being like angry horny at each other is how I would describe it.
This is war, Laura. There's no happy horny. It's only angry horny happening. No, it did. It didn't feel too forced to me. But I also have to state that like I typically do not read romantasy, so I don't really know, or even romance novels.
Yeah.
So I don't really know how it stacks up to other books in these genres.
Yeah. I mean, I read some romance, but I don't usually. Enemies to lovers is not my trope of choice. For a number of reasons. I think that like this version of enemies to lovers is way more palatable because they're never really awful to each other, and nobody's like really abusive towards each other, which I think a lot of times when you look at enemies to lovers, it's often portrayed that way. Not that it only has to be portrayed that way, but very so often that seems to be like a common trend. So yeah, I think that like she does a really good job of like adding in like these scenes of tension even from the beginning. Like there's that whole like sparring match that's supposed to be kind of sexy where he's just like taking her daggers away, but like not actually, causing any physical harm. And so the building blocks are there. It's funny because like, and I think I said this before, like I famously did not realize that this book was like a new adult romance. I just thought it was like YA fantasy. So as soon as they actually started sleeping together, I was like, oh wow. Like,
yeah.
I didn't realize we were going to get like an actual sex scene in this book.
Yeah. And Rebecca Yarros really does not shy away from certain vocabulary, which I appreciated. Kind of throwing back to an episode, Pam, where you and I talked about smut in literature. Mm-hmm. I have a really hard time with it in general because a lot of it doesn't do anything for me. I feel like it's not realistic enough for me to really, really enjoy it. And I feel like this series has done a better job of that than what I've seen in other places.
Mm-hmm.
How do y'all feel about that?
I would agree with that.
I was just really glad that there weren't like a million dicks as swords analogies happening in this because I feel like that's what always happens.
Nobody's like unsheathing.
Yeah.
You two did an episode of What the Hype on those topics, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
We did, yeah.
We can also plug that in the show notes if
y'all are interested. Let's talk about smut, baby. I believe that's the episode title.
That's right. We're going to be back to speak about some of the new lingo that we got in Iron Flame in just a moment after these words from our sponsors. Okay, so let's get into some of the new lingo. You've already heard us talking about venin and wyvern, just as a refresher, because there are a ton of new details and characters and places dropped in this book. Venin are humans who draw power from the source, and they are the ones who create wyvern, which are basically these dragon-like creatures. Even when Violet sees one for the first time, it takes her a second to realize it's not a dragon. And their whole purpose is to fight and kill dragons. We get a lot of focus on rebellion relics in this book, and this isn't the first time we've heard of this. We definitely had this concept explained in Fourth Wing, but it's very important that it's touched on again in this book, based on where the story goes. But this is the mark that the children of the officers from the Tirish Rebellion carry. They're also known and referred to as the Marked Ones throughout the series. We also learn about ward stones, which are protective invisible shields powered by magic, also used to kill venom, and luminaries, which give off extreme heat. That is the only known method for creating weapons to kill venom. So those last couple of items obviously are really important, and really the driving forces of what Violet and team are trying to hunt down in this book. But to talk a little bit about our reading experiences, I wanted to ask us in general to compare Iron Flame to Fourth Wing. Did we like it about equally, more or less? What were our takes?
Yeah, so I feel like I did generally enjoy the sequel as much as the first book, but there's always something so charming about the first book in a series. All the world building. I know some people can find it to be like too much at times, but in this case, I loved all the world building in Fourth Wing. And if I have one complaint about Iron Flame, the end, the battle scene felt a little too messy to me. It was a little hard to follow.
I agree with Andrew. I think that, well, I feel like the two books came out really close together.
They
the
did.
First
They
and second.
did.
And I wonder if perhaps the second book was a little rushed, both like to be written and also maybe to be edited and like revised before they put it out. And I think that's why sometimes some parts felt a little disjointed. I agree with the battle. I feel like I had to read it, that just like that last like 150 pages where that happens, about like 3 times before I really understood, I think, exactly what was happening. Because it just gets hard to follow. And I get that there's a lot of moving parts that are going on, but I also kind of wonder if maybe that was kind of down to rushed writing and rushed editing. So I hope that since we got a bit of a longer break between book 2 and 3, some of those issues will be resolved. I know there were some other issues people pointed out too over the course of Iron Flame that also seemed disjointed or rushed or kind of hard to follow. And so I kind of get the sense that maybe it just suffered a little bit from the quick turnaround.
Yeah.
But the overall story, that's not to say like the overall story and the overall book were bad. It's just that you kind of get the sense that maybe, some parts needed to be tightened a bit more.
I felt like Fourth Wing was a much more linear story. And this, I agree, at points definitely did feel disjointed. I don't know if it was just the amount of like travel that threw me off, but there is a lot of travel in this story. They're always going somewhere. And I'm like, wait, where are they right now?
Yeah.
And
Honestly,
I have to like page back and be like, okay.
She could have split Iron Flame into 2 parts because the book is part 1 and part 2. And there's so much information and ground to cover, to your point, more so than in Fourth Wing. I think Fourth Wing, as an introduction to the series, does a really great job of dropping you in the action and explaining what you need to know as you go along. So there's the learning curve to kind of get into this world is very easy. And then Iron Flame is like, it almost like dials it up to a point where like, yeah, like it is like, it's just so much information that you do kind of have to be like, wait a minute. Okay. Like, let me remember like what this is or like what that is, or,
The sequel's 100 pages longer, actually. And I think part of it for me reading Iron Flame was that I wanted to read it as quick as possible so I can jump in on all the talk online.
Yeah, all the
avoid
theories.
Getting spoiled too. Yeah. And of course, TikTok, this series is huge on TikTok. You can't really avoid spoilers on TikTok. Like you sort of can, but you can't. So yeah, I think that was part of it too. And I think with the next book, Onyx Storm, which comes out in January, I'm just going to have to take my time. I don't know the page count yet. I don't know if that's available yet, but I'm going to take it slower next time.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I also I list well, I kind of traded off between reading this book and listening to it because I've had in the last month or so I've had a couple of long drives I had to go on, so I listened to the audiobook for some of it, and I don't know, I think jumping back and forth between audiobook to like physical book made it a little harder for me to keep track of like all the new things that were being introduced in the story. But again, it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just
No.
that it literally could have been books 2 and 3. To
I'm glad
Pam's
you
point.
two agree with me.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I feel so dumb saying this. But...
No, you shouldn't. You shouldn't. I definitely felt the same way. But there's still a lot really good going on in here. And we're going to talk about, which storylines we were most invested in. But again, there's a lot of sex in these books, and we've already touched on it, and we've touched on like the language that's used. And I'm curious to know how y'all rate the sex scenes. Kind of picking up the thread that we left before the break, where we were like, sometimes smut works, sometimes it doesn't. Do these work for you?
I don't know if, as a gay person, I don't know if I needed all this detail personally. It's not my flavor of smut.
I think some scenes work better than others for me. But that's just like the nature of the beast, so to speak, right? It's like there's like one line and it'll take you out. I know Laura knows. Or like one term, and then you're just like, yeah, this is really funny, but it's not hot anymore.
Exactly. It's like, yeah, my mind was kind of turned on by reading that. And then as soon as you said that, it was that like, thing, it was like, so nope, don't want this anymore. I will say that I think I liked the sex scenes in Fourth Wing better. There weren't as many of them. But I felt like I liked those a little bit better. I feel like in this book, the whole push and pull dynamic, that just doesn't really do it for me. So I wasn't a huge fan of that, but there are definitely points, like certain sentences you'll read and be like, ooh, like I remember I'll have to go back and like actually pull the line. But at one point I like had to just take a moment and just be like, wow, like I don't think I've ever seen a series go into like that level of explicit detail. And it could just be that I'm not reading the right series.
And I have to admit, I sometimes gloss over the sex scenes, especially if it's a relationship, like a sexual relationship that I'm not particularly interested in reading. That said, there are plenty of people who enjoy reading these scenes, and good for you. And if it doesn't ultimately contribute to the plot, then I don't really need it. And I know this is a discussion that gets brought up a lot. Like, wasn't it Gen Z saying they don't want sex in movies and TV?
Oh, yeah.
I don't need the sex. Now, it'd be another thing if, like, they're having sex and Violet finds, this secret weapon on the backside of Xaden and his butt crack. Okay, that's adding to the plot. It's like if a survival contestant finds an immunity idol in the woods and they weren't expecting it. That adds to the plot.
Yeah.
But
to be fair, I think that like you could argue that the sex scenes in what is it? Fourth Wing actually do add to the plot, because her signet starts going off like crazy. It's like, oh, okay, great.
Fair.
Like,
fair.
But yeah, it's like to that point, like it serves a point. But if you're not into that, you're right. You can easily gloss over and you're not going to like miss any of the plot, and you can still enjoy the rest of it.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm trying to remember if it was, either when they were sparring in Fourth Wing or when they were fucking for the first time. But Violet notices all the scars on Xaden's back. And in this book, we find out where he got them from, and that he received them courtesy of Violet's mom. So that was
about trauma.
Pretty fucked up. Yeah. And then also making him promise to keep her safe, like long before they knew that they were going to be bonded to these dragons that were super horny for each other. So yeah, a lot of backstory there that's pretty like traumatic that Xaden again like plays pretty close to the vest.
But we learn about through sex scenes.
Yes. Sex is educational. Anyway, so I wanted to ask y'all, what other storylines were we invested in from Iron Flame? I had a few. Something that we haven't touched on yet that I wanted to make sure to bring up because we haven't talked about her is Andarna's long sleep that she has in this book.
Yeah, the bonus dragon.
Yeah, she's going from being a baby dragon to being an adolescent dragon. And first of all, I love how stubborn she is about it throughout the story, and not wanting to stay asleep, and how she keeps invading Violet's like mind space, and Taryn keeps coming in and being like, go fuck to sleep.
He's such a grumpy like grandpa really dragon. Is. Yeah. Do you know what's so funny is like you guys have seen like at least the trailer for like the Venom movies. Like that's the voice in my head for Taryn.
Same.
Anytime he's talking to her, which is that's what I hear too.
That plot line was really cute. It's fun watching her grow up, and of course she comes in
and you know I like the parallel too that they make at the end where like Taryn tells Violet that she'll never be able to bear a rider because her wing is like messed up. And it's like, you know, like, so she's like, she bonded like with the one other dragon that has a disability, like a physical disability like her. But then also like, you know, like they also start hinting at the fact that, well, we know by the end that Andarna is more important than like we did before, like, you know, in the first book. But then like even before she becomes like intrinsic to raising the wards again, she talks about like, what is it? She tells her something like, oh, like I waited to hatch for you because like I knew you were coming or something like that. So I thought that was really interesting. Like I wanted to learn more about that, you know, like
and maybe we will. I mean, I feel like we're definitely
very chosen one prophecy kind of to go back to Andrew's Harry Potter correlation. But
no, I do love how Andarna was like immediately defensive of the wing, where she was basically like, I don't need your help. I'm fine. Which is something that also mirrors Violet, right? Like Violet does not want people to assume that because of her disability, she can't do something or that she needs to be handled with kid gloves. And we see that personality trait really mirrored with Andarna. I love her. Like she's so cheerful, but at the same time, when she starts going through her adolescence, she's very sassy.
So funny.
Yeah.
And all these dragons, all the other dragons, to the best of my memory, are older. They're more mature. So you get this very alternative, you get this nice alternative type of dragon who's discovering the world for the first time. And it's Violet's child, practically.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We'll be right back to talk about more storylines that we were most invested in Iron Flame after these messages from our sponsors. Okay, so what else jumped out at y'all about Iron Flame?
I really enjoyed the dynamic between Violet and Sloane is the sister of the late Liam. So I really enjoyed seeing Sloane absolutely hate Violet, and Sloane hates Violet because she blames Violet for the death of her brother. But Violet tries her damnedest to help Sloane out. So I really liked that dynamic and watching that evolve over the course of the book. And like I mentioned earlier, I just generally enjoyed the suppression. Well, I just won't bring that one up again.
Wow, it's almost like you're being suppressed.
I'm trying not to be repetitive.
No, but I mean, it is such like a relevant theme pretty much all the time. It's evergreen. I mean, it's why you see dystopian series like these take off, because people can relate to a lot of the themes that we see in the stories. And I think particularly if you look at the world that we're all living in right now, I think similar to other books that we've drawn comparisons to real life, I think you can absolutely pull some of that from this series. So no, I think it's totally fine.
So yeah,
to surface that.
The suppression of the truth. I was going to say that the Venom are real. And we see this in the Hunger Games too, right? It's not just Harry Potter. Like, it's a big plot point in the Hunger Games with the Capitol, and people like reading about these rebellions.
Yeah. One thing that I also really loved was the integration of the Griffin writers, because, you know, that's something that, like, they were clearly being used as a scapegoat by the government in Fourth Wing. And it's very like, know who your real enemy is, right? And it turns out that they weren't ever really the enemies. They were just on the other side trying to survive. And that just added like a whole new dynamic. And obviously, like, that comes with its own new slew of characters, and like there are more rules that are added. But that was really fun to kind of watch play out over the course of the middle of the book, basically.
Yeah. I agree. Yeah. And they're kind of forced to do a team up, right? Which, you know, feels weird to people like Violet, who are only, you know, recently becoming, like, I guess we could say, woke to what's going on here. But the reality is, you know, the marked ones have known the deal the entire time. And I found it also really interesting to get more there. I, again, really liked the dynamics that Violet was having to contend with. This, like, push and pull of having this horrible secret that she was holding on to, but that she didn't feel like she could tell anyone. Her not being able to tell Mira for quite some time that Brennan was alive, and having to sit on that. I think the whole arc of this book with Varish was something that definitely kept me on the edge of my seat, because that fucker was so creepy. And I don't know if it's just because the portion of the book that I listened to mostly in audiobook format covered a lot of the Varish scenes, and the voice that was given to Varish sounded a lot like an evil Varys from Game of Thrones.
Oh, that's interesting.
It just made me uncomfortable, because I was like, listen, Varys is like, he's crafty and he's sneaky, but he's not out and out evil. And I felt like this was just that voice, but make it evil. And he was doing such horrible things to Violet. He tortured her. He kept trying to get her to introduce him to Andarna, which was clearly going to be dangerous for her. So just like so many feelings with that guy. And he's definitely a character that I love to hate in this book.
Yeah. I also loved that, like, they set up a like kind of like a backstory between Tairn and his dragon. Because they were like right from the beginning, he's like, I'll take your other eye. It's like, damn, like there's some like history here, apart from the fact that Varish hates Violet too. So
yeah, Tairn
was really satisfying too when he like forced him to apologize.
Yeah, I mean, Tairn was about to, I think, decapitate. What was it? Solus?
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Again, the names are definitely something that I struggle to keep up with.
They're a lot to juggle.
Yeah, they are. But yeah, that whole scene definitely had me on the edge of my seat, because, you know, these books don't shy away from violence and character deaths, right? And when we think about some of the shocking scenes that we got, you know, in Fourth Wing and in this book, I was on the edge of my seat thinking, like, is Tairn about to just bite this dragon's head off? It really felt like we might go there. So I was actually nervous.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, that's the thing about this series. Expect the unexpected. And I think, we're kind of starting to get into this now. You're talking about the torture, pretty brutal scenes you're watching there. And then there are some pretty surprising character deaths too. So you can expect Taryn to, be killed. You could expect anybody to be killed at any moment.
Yeah, I definitely feel like there are some really popular theories going around about who isn't going to make it out of this series. And depending on, which characters you particularly identify with, that might make your heart a little sad. But speaking of character deaths, whether in Fourth Wing or in Iron Flame, have there been any character deaths so far that we found particularly shocking?
For me, it was definitely Liam. And again, like, I don't know why, because they set him up to be basically Violet's bodyguard, right? Xaden literally puts him there to protect her at all costs. And clearly he takes that very literally because he gives his life for her. But he was just so many of these like secondary characters are so likable. Like, I also really like, I know we haven't, we only have so much time on these episodes, but I really love too the dynamic of like Rhiannon, Riddick, and Sawyer. And they're just like such good friends. And they're there's much fun to read too, and to see them interact, even if they're in the background. Bodhi and like Imogen too. Like there's a lot of good characters to kind of like sink your teeth into. But yeah, like Liam was just so likable from the get-go. And he's just out there like carving his little dragons. And it was really sad when she killed him off at the end of book 1. And it was kind of crazy that then he gets brought back in these torture scenes. And I don't know about you guys. I definitely thought that like maybe she was hinting at the fact that like she was actually like communicating with his ghost or his spirit. But I guess Rebecca Yarros has since clarified that he was just a hallucination, because that was like, I think a lot of people were just kind of like hoping that maybe there was something else going on there because he was so beloved. But yeah, that was a big one for me.
Yeah. There was another surprise though, right, Pam, with another character we didn't expect to see again, but we did.
in the opposite way. You said, which character death did you find particularly shocking? Which character did you not expect to come back? Jack Barlow, who like it was like, can't this guy fucking die? He's talk about like a character that's easy to hate. I would put him on par with Varish there. He's definitely just so awful in the first book. And I guess maybe we should have seen it coming again, because like he kind of like gets killed off towards the middle, and then that's the end of that. So then she doesn't really have like a big foe to contend with at Bisgayeth. But yeah, I didn't expect to see him come back. And the whole like twist at the end about him actually being a Venom now, and how Nolan, the healer, had been trying to like keep him alive or like bring him back, I think at the behest of Varish, right? Was like that was like, talk about another insane twist. I think that was up there with the Brennan reveal for me.
Well, and also that he helps Violet.
He does to regain her trust, basically, right? He's double agenting, but the other way around.
Any others? One that stuck out to me was Nadine's death in this book. It was so quick and brutal.
Yeah,
that it was in the sparring gym, right? And she literally just has her neck snapped in front of everyone.
That's when they say like they ask her if she's Violet, right?
Yeah, it's a case of mistaken identity.
Yeah. And that's like also like, that's crazy, because I think that's basically her death is there to show that like they were never supposed to survive, and now they're all in danger, right? Because they know too much.
Yeah. Well, because again, Dane's dad sent them on a suicide mission, fully intending for them to die at the hands of the Venom and the Wyvern, and then blame it on the Griffins.
Again, it's like expect the unexpected in this series. Like, really, I mean, that was that when Nadine died, it was just like in a scene you really would not have expected that to occur.
No, well, it was in front of a bunch of people.
You're right.
Like they're all just standing there,
which isn't allowed, right? Are they allowed to? Are
I
they?
think they are, because like you could just die at any time there.
There are
Yeah.
certain scenarios where they can't kill other
I don't think they're
students, right?
supposed to kill you in your sleep. That's why
Yeah.
they get.
Well,
That's
and
the
I
line.
think
Yeah,
That's not
the
fair.
line.
But during practice, sure.
Yeah.
I don't think you're allowed to kill someone from your own wing, right?
I think you might be right.
Yeah, but if it's someone from a different one, all
Fair
bets are
game.
off. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, this was definitely playing dirty for
Yeah.
sure, because it's like you had people lulled into a false sense of security because they're just milling around after class and just walk up and snap her neck.
Yeah.
It was rough. I was like, what the heck? But any other characters that stick out to us before we wrap?
I don't think so. And I mean, we still have 3 books to go, so there's probably new characters who we'll be meeting in the next 3 who are hopefully super compelling to make up for all these deaths. It might be a bit of a revolving door. But I was reading not to get ahead of ourselves here, but I was reading the Onyx Storm book summary earlier today, and just like the teaser, and it was saying that she's Violet's going to be heading out into like new areas of the world. So I think that's going to be a big opportunity to meet some hopefully compelling new characters.
One more I did want to bring up before we wrap, because I don't know, like, if she'll come back up again. Not necessarily a surprising death, but I do think that just General Sorengale, or Lilith, her mom, the confessions that she was trying to make before she sacrifices herself so the wards will go back up, I think that is probably going to be really integral to a lot of the new information we get going forward, because she basically tells Violet that like everything that they've done was to like bring her to this point, so that kind of like hints at the fact that like there was more there than she was letting on. And she is kind of painted at the beginning as like this not great character, but the fact that she still sacrifices for her children, and that the story kind of hints at the fact that she's been sacrificing for her children at the expense of knowing all of what's been going on, is like really intriguing. I know we talked to you about how like it's revealed as well that she's the one that like gives Xaden all the marks, but then she asks him to take care of Violet her first year too. It's like, I think that she's been playing an interesting game, and we probably didn't see like the most of it, or we probably don't know like the half of what she was doing behind the scenes.
Yeah, it kind of makes me wonder if we're going to get any writings from her in the future, like thinking about the Book of Brennan, for example, that we got in book 1. Like, I wonder if we're going to get more of that insight moving forward.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Because at the start of each chapter, there's a little passage from somewhere, whether it's the Book of Brennan or otherwise. So yeah, maybe we could start hearing more from her, especially now that she has, spoiler alert, died.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And I mean, it really is so interesting with her mom, because she really does start out as a total ice queen, and it really does not feel like she cares if Violet lives or dies. So it is interesting to learn that through Violet's perceived like neglect, or her perceived neglect of Violet and her dismissiveness towards her, she was actually trying to protect her the entire time.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see if we get more of that.
Agreed.
Lots to look forward to.
Yeah. And coming up soon.
Right. Yeah. If you're dying to know what happens next, join the club. But the 3rd book in this series, Onyx Storm, is being released January 25th, 2025. So just a couple of months away. And as we get a little closer to that release date, we will be recording an episode with all of our theories, predictions, and questions for the 3rd installment. And of course, once we've all read, y'all can expect a thorough debrief of Onyx Storm. Thank you so much for tuning in. We would love to hear your thoughts, questions, and theories. So feel free to drop those in the comment section on YouTube, or follow us at What the Hype Podcast on YouTube, Instagram, Threads, and TikTok. We are What the Hype Show on the platform formerly known as Twitter. Pam and Andrew, thanks so much for joining me today. It's been really fun, and I can't wait to do our theories and predictions episode next.
Yeah, thank you for leading the discussion.
Yeah, of course. And a little bit of a sneak peek into next week's What the Hype. Micah will be your guide for getting into Netflix's Cobra Kai. So look forward to that. Thanks so much, y'all, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.